attending today's TSB subcommittee. Just a reminder for all members, because I think we've got some new members here, the meeting's being live streamed on YouTube. In the interest of the meeting running smoothly and effectively, please just remember to keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking, and please raise your hand and wait for invitation to speak before commenting. When we move to a vote, please hold your hand up clearly and for long enough so that it can be recorded by Anthony, who'll be taking a note of the votes today. So first item is just the announcements. I've just got apologies from Mark Taylor from the MMO. And then we've also got two new members with us today. Rob Benson, who was elected after the last meeting due to the resignation of Ron Graham, and Jim taking his ex officio position as vice chair. Rob was taken as the member with the next highest vote from the nominations taken back in June and confirmed by resolution of the authority in December. And then also with us today, we've got Gary Piddock. Thank you very much for joining us. We're really pleased to have you with us today, and thank you to the officers for facilitating to allow Gary to join this meeting from the Carnforth office. Moving on to the next agenda item, declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. I believe Anthony has requested that those be sent in advance by email. Anthony, I don't know whether you've received any.
None further.
No interest received at the moment. So if you can, please raise your hand and state your interest in the agenda item. As we get to that item, that would be gratefully received. And welcome to Lawrence. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
Morning. So moving on to the next agenda item, the minutes of the TSB meeting held on the 3rd of November 2020. I'll just go through them first, page by page, and take any amendments or corrections. Please just raise your hand if you've got anything to add on those. So page 1, Kelsey.
I'm a Mr. Thompson, not a Ms.
Good spot. Anthony, could you make a note of that?
I've got a note of that one. Sorry, Kelsey.
Page 2.
Emily, sorry, just a quick one.
Yes.
Similar theme. I feel like saying I'm Ms, not Mr, but actually I'm Doctor, not Mr.
You're Honours Doctor.
No, I'm not. Not through as it goes through.
Oh, as it goes through. Sorry, on the first
Thought
page.
I got all of them. I'll have another check.
I don't normally do sleep, but if you are, then I am. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
There you are.
That's fine. So that's not on page 1, but throughout the document. Okay. Yeah. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. And page 10. I just noticed that Gary's spelt wrong on page 10. It's got 2 R's. Any other changes? Anthony, have you got a note of those?
I've got a note of those.
Thank you. Could I take a proposer that these are a true and accurate record of the meeting, proposed by Trevor, and a seconder? Seconded by Brian. All of those in favour? All against? And any abstentions? Did you capture that, Anthony?
Yeah, Gary, are you abstaining because you weren't at the meeting?
Yeah, that's
okay.
correct, Anthony. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. I suppose the only comment that I would like to make is just that it was a little bit frustrating for the resolution that we made at the last meeting, that the minutes be sent to the chair before being sent round to the committee, to not be followed as soon as it was put out. But these are far more comprehensive than the minutes from the last meeting, so that was good. Jim.
I was just going to ask a question on that very issue, and I'd forgotten about it in the interim. I wasn't at the August meeting, but the last meeting refused to accept the August meeting's minutes. Do I recall correctly, those have been now addressed through correspondence? Where do we stand with respect to the August meeting minutes?
I believe they were approved by email.
That's all right, okay.
I don't know whether that's correct. I believe Mandy circulated them and asked for a response confirmation by email. Stephen or Anthony, you able to confirm that you had members' responses on that?
Yes, I don't think we got any responses, but that is broadly what we did. We actually found another version, and I think probably what had happened was that we put the wrong version out to the meeting, and when we found the right version, we got that approved by correspondence, as Emily says, and there weren't any comments on that version.
As far as I remember, Mandy sent me a first draft of that original version. I made comments on that and sent that back to Mandy, which was then edited and then sent round to members for a vote. So you're saying you didn't receive any vote that was a true and accurate record, those amended minutes?
Well, I can't remember how the email was worded. I don't know whether you've got it to hand, Anthony. If you want to go back to the email that we sent round, did we ask for comments by a certain date and not receive any comments, so we took them as done, or can you add to that?
Brian,
Let me have a look. Mandy sent it, so
yeah.
I need to check.
Chair, my recollection is that we were actually asked to affirm our approval of the minutes. That's my recollection.
So.
Yeah, I did that, but obviously
I'm
not sure whether other members did.
And if I might just say, I've just found in my inbox an email was sent on the 5th of November, which was followed up by an email on the 16th saying that Mandy had only received responses from Brian and Steve Brown.
It says she'd like to draw a line under it as soon as possible and ask for approval by close of play on Friday the 13th. She would be grateful if any remaining members could respond to the email with their view with an attached copy of the minutes, but I haven't got any further email correspondence after that.
I received from Mandy finalised minutes on the 23rd of November.
But no comment on who had voted.
No.
Not sure whether, in order for those to be fully accepted, we would need to take a full vote on that at a meeting if it can't be done by email. Obviously, it's not here to ask what responses.
Would it be appropriate for the record, and just to make sure it's closed off, for the next TSB meeting for the August minutes to be submitted just for a formal vote, just so we can go through the process? Would that be? I
think so. I mean, it's quite a long time will have passed since then, but I think they should be formally signed off by all members.
I agree.
Are you willing to make a proposal on that?
I'll propose it.
I'll second it.
And that's for the minutes from the August meeting to be taken to the May TSB committee for approval. All of those in favour? All against? And any abstentions? Great, thank you. Are there any matters arising from Stephen?
Yes, can I just say, just for information really, that these minutes were done by the transcription service, Apple Transcription. We've made not a lot of edits to them at all, just minor corrections to clarify who's who and that sort of thing. If you're broadly happy with that, we're proceeding to use Apple Transcription. We've used them now for this November meeting and for the December meeting. We're planning to use them for this meeting as well at the moment, because you get the full recording and you get the draft minute done, and it's proving quite an efficient way of doing it. It does take a few weeks to get the minute through, and that was part of the reason why we didn't manage to get them out to Emily in good time. I mean, I also forgot that we're now supposed to do that, but it takes a good 4 weeks to get the minute from the Apple Transcription, so we need to take that into account. But overall, I think it's quite a good product. I don't know what members think.
I did make quite a lot of changes to the initial draft that came round. There were quite a lot of typos, and I think the problem with the transcription service is that it sort of takes the I's and the we's rather than putting it in the third person as the minutes would normally be, which obviously then has to be picked up by a person along with any kind of names that need inserting. I don't know if you have any updates on when a clerk might be in place. I think it's probably a reasonable temporary measure, but that's certainly not a replacement of a person taking the minutes, I wouldn't think.
Well, as we said last time, it's not strictly the remit of this committee to discuss the recruitment, but I can say that we're quite close to making an appointment on a clerk, I hope. We're just checking references and so on.
Jim?
Well, that's good news. I was just then wondering if presumably it's finance and HR that would be dealing with that.
Well, in as much as they need to, they've delegated it to me actually to do the clerk recruitment, but they discussed it at the December meeting.
Great. I was just wondering if it would be, bearing in mind what Emily's just said, and I think all of our own experiences, it would be great to see a new clerk in post and to welcome the progress that's been made there. So whether the TSB could give that sort of supportive noise to finance and HR. Given that I don't think any finance and HR people are here. But anyway.
Chairman not here? No.
No.
Right. Well, of course, he's the link, and in fact, you're vice chairman now, Jim.
Oh gosh, yeah. Am I?
In fact, you are a member of the finance and HR now. If
get me.
So,
I shall relay the enthusiasm to see a new clerk in place to my first meeting of finance and HR. Thank you for reminding me, Steve.
So just to clarify, was your proposal that you plan to use the transcription service for this meeting?
Well, we are doing. We've taken that decision, so they are recording it for us, and yes, they are commissioned to prepare a minute for us.
But not for all future minutes, regardless of whether there's a
oh no, we've not made any great future commitment to them. We can do it meeting by meeting.
Thank you. Trevor?
Can we just clarify what this Apple transcription service is, please? Is it a private one or something run by a computer company?
I don't think it's anything to do with the i company, you know, with the big Apple company. Anthony, do you want to just answer that?
Yeah, it's a transcription company. They do transcriptions for the police and all sorts like that. They also transcribe interviews under caution, etc. They have all the necessary clearances to do so. It's nothing to do with Apple, as in Apple Computers. It's a private company in the Northwest.
Ah, okay. Well, that would probably explain why it takes 4 weeks to get it then, which I find to be quite remarkable, actually. Somebody's bread and butter. But there we are. We are where we are, I suppose. And how much does this service cost, roughly, if that's not an inappropriate inquiry?
I think these minutes cost about £400.
Wow.
But we didn't. Not sure we instructed them immediately. It's cheaper if you instruct them before the meeting, so they do everything all at once. I think maybe we took the recording off them the first time, and then when we went back and asked them to do the minute, so it's slightly more expensive. But it is going to be that sort of order. I mean, you're getting 10 pages of minutes. It's quite a long document, and I think that's why it takes a long time. We have, by comparison with other organisations, I would say we have very expansive minutes, and that's fine. I think it's appropriate to keep detailed records of our discussions. I'm not complaining about that, but it is a long and complex document. Whoever does it, you know, you've got 30 odd people as members for the main meeting anyway. And you know, sorting out all the names and so on is quite a job in itself. I mean, they may get quicker at it as we use them more regularly, and I'm thinking it's actually quite good value for money, and it's worth it to get the full transcription is what I'm thinking, so that we can be absolutely sure of the content of the meeting if we need to be. But if you don't want to, we won't.
No, thank you for the very comprehensive response. Thank you.
Can I clarify, the turnaround time is actually faster than that, and they will be transcribing this meeting, so I can check the actual turnaround time. I just have to log in the portal.
That's okay. We can leave that for now. Any other matters arising from the previous minutes? No. Moving on to item 5, the bylaw review. Stephen?
Yes, it really is just a brief update on where we've got to with the various bylaws that are underway. Bylaw 3 has gone back to MMO. I hope it's for the last time, and it'll go through to DEFRA now for confirmation. Similarly with the potting bylaw, bylaw 4, we've made corrections and the amendments that MMO wanted in December, returned that as well to MMO. I'm not sure, Anthony, I don't know whether you know, we've not had a deadline. They haven't given us a target for confirmation, have they, or for the next stage of it? But yeah, I mean, it still could take quite a while for both of those to go through to DEFRA and get confirmed. I know other IFCAs are having delays to their bylaws just at the moment. I guess it's not DEFRA's top priority. So I think we have to wait and see as regards both of those. But I think we've got them out of our hands for the moment. I hope they won't come back with any more comments from MMO, but that remains to be seen. So that's those two. And then the other two, the LISO bylaw is in its consultation, which I think ends about the 5th of March. Both the LISO actually and the MCRS bylaw have gone through to their formal consultation, which ends on the 5th of March. I don't suppose we've had any responses yet, Anthony. I don't know whether you've noticed any coming in. I've not seen anything.
I've had one
on
LISO.
I see. Yeah. So that's the 4 that are up and running, and we haven't really made any decisions now then about future priorities and which bylaws we might want to tackle next. You know, we've talked about the netting as a difficult one, but a necessary one, and we've talked about the vessel length bylaw. I think for either of those, or for any of the others that we've suggested as likely ones to go forward, we will need to have I think a briefing meeting with members, and maybe even co-opt in some expertise, because we're not, I as an officer, I'm not sure where we're going with those bylaws and what problem they're actually trying to fix and what the main measures to go in the bylaw might be. So we need to have some discussion of that. I don't know whether you want to say anything about netting, Joe, because you were working on that and making some progress, but I know you've got to, essentially, you've had to put it to one side because of all the other pressures and things that have been going on. But that's really where we are with the bylaws just now.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the report, Stephen. I was surprised it was even briefer than the last. I might just refer back to the resolution made at the last meeting where we agreed that the bylaw review should be taken forward to this meeting with a plan looking at the strategy on how to move forward with the next few bylaws once the current bylaws out of the way. And essentially what we've ended up with is a list of bylaws again, and after several years of members asking for an appropriate and strategic review of the bylaws, it is frustrating, and it feels like procrastination, if not obstruction, that our requests and resolutions and the hours that we spent volunteering at
I object to that, Emily.
two meetings.
I object to that, Emily. It's not obstruction, and it's not in any way delay. We've been preoccupied with a lot of other stuff. I think you've got to be careful what you say at these meetings. Well, remember, they're being recorded. We
have had 2 meetings, which you might call a briefing with members, or a subgroup of members, to discuss the issues, what issues are with each of those bylaws that we've brought back to these meetings and discussed again, and we still don't have any way to move forward.
Well, we've been very busy with the others. We've got 4 on the cards being progressed as quickly as we can. We can't really cope with another one at the moment. And as I say, I am not clear what direction we want to go in with any of the other bylaws that are lined up to be done next. So I do need direction from members on that.
I feel that we've tried to give that. Steve?
Just a thought with the netting bylaw, which is going to be an extremely lengthy affair. If Joe could send out his thoughts to TSB, and perhaps we could then do what we did with the MCRS bylaw, because these things are extremely, how to say, intertwined, and have a sub-meeting to iron out any minor issues that are going to crop up or will crop up, because the netting bylaw, as we are progressing the potting bylaw, the two are extremely intertwined, and because of that and the restrictions within the potting bylaw, particularly reference to gear marking, we need to get some progress going. So I'm just trying to suggest a way forward, perhaps, especially now Gary's here, because he will have expertise and very strong opinions on this bylaw as well. It might be wise to get them sent out just as a rough note, and then see if we can call an extra meeting as we did for the MCRS bylaw, and perhaps get some progress made on this one, because I think it's going to take a very long time. And due to its nature, it needs to be sorted as quickly as we can, really.
Just to respond to that, Stephen, quickly before I take Brian's comment. To me, it seems like a sensible way forward. I think as we've gone through this process trying to look at the next few bylaws, we have acknowledged that the netting bylaw is extremely complicated, and so it might not be the first one that gets drafted in finality because of the length of time it might take to sort out. And obviously you've also put in a significant amount of work looking at potentially 2 of the simpler bylaws to look at in terms of the shrimp bylaw, which were proposed at the time as a as a way that those bylaws could be taken forward. So I'll just take Brian's comment and then Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's a very quick.
Sorry, Jim's had his hand up for a while as well. Just
sorry, I didn't see him.
I'll be as brief as possible, Chair. I think the Chief Executive previously asked for guidance from members, but the way this process has got to work, it's the officers that produce the initial thinking as to potential strategies and policy, and then it's the members who decide the policy issue. So I think, Chair, that what we actually need is that strategic analysis in terms of the potential bylaws that need to be revised or changed, why they need to be changed, how important they are, what their impacts are on the marine environment, all those considerations. And it's that sort of big thinking exercise that is required to come to members, for members to then understand the issues and make choices as between competing policy options. But that's the way it's got to happen. It can't happen in reverse. It's not for us to produce the thinking and then decide upon it. It's that division between the officers and the members. Sorry. Thank you.
No, I totally agree. And well, that was what you said at the last meeting, and that was what we resolved would happen. And it hasn't happened. Joe, and then Jim.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, no, I fully agree with what Brian said. Just to sort of put everyone's mind at ease, there has been quite a bit of work on this behind the scenes on the netting bylaw, just ticking along over the last few months and longer at points where there have been disruptions with other bylaws that have needed urgent work, as we've seen, and then obviously COVID-19 has come along. So it is there. I actually have a paper on my laptop where I've analysed the issues we have in the district, looked at the current legislation that we have, holes in that, gaps across the district, points where there's overlap, and also an idea of what I and other officers think we need in terms of a bylaw to cover these activities across the Northwestern NWIFCA district. So that is there. I fully agree with Brian. I think that, and Steve actually, we've proved a good way of working, but I do think that it is for that process to come to the TSB first, at least with a paper of saying this is the strategic idea of the bylaw, and then for the perhaps members or officers to go away and to problem solve and to look at how we get around any of the issues that we might come across, and to put our thinking caps on to move it forwards effectively and efficiently through the bylaw process. But I do think we need to be mindful of that bylaw making process which is set out, and make sure that we adhere to that through the process.
Thanks, Joe. That seems like a sensible suggestion. Do you have an idea on timescales of what you were thinking there in terms of when a paper could be brought to TSB?
Well, I'll take guidance from Stephen as the chief executive on that, as my line manager. But there has been, I think, enough work to move this forwards in some ways to the next TSB meeting, certainly at appropriate time. But I do understand that we need to be mindful of not getting ourselves caught up with too many bylaws, across these meetings that can get confusing. So I think we need to be mindful of that as well.
Stephen, anything you'd like to add to that? No. Jim?
Yeah, I'll come in. I'll just say, yes, I'm quite happy for it to come to the next meeting. Joe, if you feel the paper is ready to do that, and if you can do any more work on it in the interim, then all to the good. So in that case, we're making netting as the next big area, and I think it is the next big area that needs to be sorted. I have said this quite regularly over the last few months and the last year or two. So we'll see what we can do with that. And Joe, you can circulate your paper either for the May meeting or beforehand if you feel it's ready to go. But I don't want you to be under a lot of pressure about it, because we're not. I can't see that we're solving any enormous problems with netting that need to be fixed. If we are, then it'd be helpful if those could be articulated, because I can see that the bylaws are a bit untidy. They need rationalising, they need making district-wide if we can, but we haven't quite articulated the problems that we're trying to fix. So yeah, happy for a paper to come forward to the May meeting, if everyone agrees.
I think that would be good if the paper could come forward to the May meeting. I'm not sure that we've agreed that it is the next big area. I don't know whether we would need to vote on that being our top priority, or whether it's something that's kind of ticking along in the background. I'm aware that, sorry, I haven't taken Jim's comment yet, and Gary's got his hand up. Jim, would you like to comment?
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I've been using my time wisely while my hand's been up, just to look back at the number of times we have visited this issue. And if you cast your mind back to December 2019, we had a special meeting to talk about the bylaw review. And at our February 2020 meeting, Emily, you gave a presentation which summarised the outcomes of that review. And some resolutions were made at the end of the 4th of February meeting, which are helpful to reflect upon now, because it seems that we have not actually made any significant progress here. And looking at the chain of reports that have been made since then, it seems to reflect that. Now, I appreciate that a lot's happened since then, but I think we are all expressing a will that there needs to be progress with this, and this has been an issue that's gone on for some time. Our last resolution, the previous meeting, was that there should be some sort of strategy for progressing these bylaws, and from what Stephen says, I think you agree with that as a resolution, and it's obviously not been possible for that to have been done by now. I would beg, please, that given that we've been talking about this for a long time, is that we grasp the nettle and do what has been resolved, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Gary?
Morning, everybody. Regarding the netting bylaw, to be quite honest with you, it's a can of worms, opening a can of worms, because as everybody's aware, or most people will be aware, of the IFCA bylaws at present, we've got two sets of bylaws regarding the netting in the district, and south of the Point of Avrig is a totally different set of bylaws to north of the Point of Avrig, with the main one being the National Rivers Authority in the past have deemed that all static gear, fixed engines, must have 3 meters of water over a fixed engine at any state of the tide. Well, it's just not workable in the south of the district, because in some of the areas where we work, we don't even have 3 meters of water. We only have what the boat will float in. So that's well, to us in the south of the district, it's a non-starter as regards that part of the bylaw. And then in the past, I've been caught in the north of the district without 3 meters of water over my gear, but yet that gear was only shallow gear. It was only like 14 meshes deep at 4 inch, which is less than, what, a metre. So I would still have enough water over my gear, but on the day, the fishery officer, enforcement officer deemed that there wasn't enough water over the gear, so therefore the gear was confiscated. Then you come back to the south of the district, if we'd have been working there, it wouldn't have been an issue. Then on the back of that, I'm not naming names and pointing fingers, but a fisherman had suggested in the north of the district to the present enforcement officer at that time, which was Dave Dobson, that we have a blanket rule of a mesh size of 4 3/4 inch, which then came in for the cod recovery zone, that if you're using static gear for your main target species was cod, it'd have to be 4 3/4 inch anyway. But it's not illegal to use a smaller mesh size or a bigger mesh size in any part of the district. So it's a major, well, from my point of view and our members' point of view, it's a major issue, this netting bylaw. It's all can of worms.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I think we've recognised that it's fairly complicated. Joe, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, just, I mean, thanks, Gary, and that's why it's great to have Gary here at the TSB meeting to you know, say these issues you know, out loud, really, as a fisherman himself. And that's important, and that would be part of the consultation, this bylaw, both with the public and industry, as well as with members of this TSB committee, as we did with the MCRS bylaw with Steve and Jim. And that's really important. So, I mean, just I'll take an action to bring a paper to the next TSB meeting on this. I think that's a good way to move this forward. It's there to progress it, and I think that will help kickstart this and move this along quite quickly.
Gary and then Brian.
Yeah, just to come back in on them regarding the netting permit business, what the IFCA needs to be aware of is, I'm not anti-sports fishermen, I'm not anti-pleasure hobby fishermen, etc. But what they need to be aware of is there's certain bodies within the pleasure angling and the bass fraternity and the hobby sports fishermen who would see this netting bylaw as an opening to what they would say, we would like the golden mile, as they put it, where they would use that as a lead in to try and implement what they would like as a golden mile, where there's no netting within a mile of the low water mark. Well, being a commercial self-employed fisherman, that's where the fish are to start with. So we need to be in there as much as they need to be in there. It's just the way that it's nature. That's how it works.
Thanks, Gary. Brian?
Yeah, very briefly, Chair. I'd just like to be assured as to what is being brought to the next TSB meeting. I mean, Joe's has been talking about work that is done on the netting issue, but I think in actuality, we were talking previously about a strategic document that looks at all the bylaw issues out there, analyses what the issues are, what the impacts are, etc. Is that what is being brought to the next TSB meeting?
I think Joe was just outlining that kind of document specifically for the netting bylaw and not other bylaws.
I'm just concerned, therefore, Chair, that we'll have a consideration of the netting bylaw, but we won't have that detailed consideration of the other potential bylaws. And there are more, you know, than is stated on Stephen's document. Because I recall from when I joined the authority, there was consideration of the restraints on the power limits for boats inside various lines. So there are a number of issues out there in terms of bylaws. And I just feel that in order to start to make process and for members to actually debate and decide what the priorities are, and from a policy point of view, we need first that overview from the officers.
Yeah, agreed. Jim?
I was going to just follow up on what Brian was saying, to be honest with you. I think it's very great that Joe's offered to bring some proposals and ideas for the netting permit bylaw to the next TSB meeting. I think that's great, because that will be a complicated thing to look at for all the reasons Gary's just outlined, plus a load more, I've no doubt. But I think that we shouldn't look side of what we've been talking about now for several meetings, and actually what Stephen mentioned himself is that there is a need for dialogue between officers and members, and maybe other people as well with expertise, to figure out what our strategy should be going forwards, and what are the key issues that maybe need to be explored in even greater detail before we can formulate what could be new bylaws for the priorities that have been identified. And without that strategy and that plan, we will not do the best job that we can of these things. So I would suggest that there are two things emerging from this discussion that I think it would be sensible for us to resolve. One is to accept Joe's offer for some proposals for the netting bylaw. I think that's great. And you know, we will take that in the spirit I think we got to with the MCRS, is that, you know, it might be Joe's first shot at it. It might not be perfect, but we can approach it in a constructive manner and not attack Joe over it. I'm sure that would be great. But then also, just going back to what Stephen was saying, and what we've been talking about for some time, is it would be great if we could have a clear strategy on how we're going to move forward with the other bylaws as well. And if we could have that at our next meeting, then I think we would feel like we're progressing this. So if I may be so bold, could I move those two things or do them one at a time, just picking up on what Brian had said? Or Stephen wanted to say something, so I'll shut up for now.
Yeah, I'll take Stephen's comment first.
Okay, well, I'll just come in because we have had a paper for the several meetings over the last couple of years where I have set out the options for the bylaws that need to be done to resolve the bylaw review as I see it. You know, the netting is one, the vessel length is another. The MCRS bylaw was one, though we're getting on with that one. There was another one in relation to IVMS, which hasn't come forward yet, but I expect it will come forward probably this year or next year. And there were a number of others. In a sense, what I put in the paper is a list of the bylaws that we need to do. And I'm not quite clear how to turn that into more of a strategy paper that decides what we do first. And I think we need to have a discussion about that, because the paper has come to members several times, and nobody has made any comment on it. And I'm struggling to see what you are wanting to turn it into a strategy paper. All the bylaws included in there are valid. They all have a level of importance, and they all have a level of difficulty. And I've been through them and outlined the problems with each of the bylaws and the difficulties we're likely to face when we tackle them. I don't really see that the order necessarily matters. It doesn't matter whether we tackle a vessel length bylaw first or a netting bylaw first. But we can really only concentrate on one thing at a time, I would say. I mean, I still don't know what sort of demands the two bylaws that are outstanding, the MCRS bylaw and the LISO bylaw. I don't know what time they will have in terms of officer demands on officer time over the next 6 months. So I think probably we've tried to set out a full. I've tried to set out a full strategy for the modification, the renewal of all the bylaws. But I don't seem to be satisfying what members want here, and I'm looking for some guidance on how to turn that paper that you've had several times into something which you would see as useful in terms of taking the process forward. From my point of view, you know, we go to the next one on the list, and I think the netting is the most important issue that needs to be tackled. I can't produce a lot of justification for that. We don't take a lot of prosecutions for netting, I have to say, but there are some. And I appreciate what Gary says about the bylaw in Cumbria, which is very difficult to enforce and very difficult to prosecute. And I think that was a while ago. Your case, I think, Gary, when your gear was confiscated. I don't think that's happened recently, has it? But you know, we don't want that sort of thing where fishermen are not understanding why they are being why sanctions are being taken against them. So I'm looking for some clarification, not on the overall strategy and policy. I understand that. and not on setting out the options, because I think I've set out the options for which bylaws we do next. But I'm looking for guidance on what you want in terms of more detail in developing the strategy and policy paper that you're talking about.
Jim, and then Joe and Gary. Jim first. Jim, you're on mute.
I was trying to unmute myself, but I moved. Something happened. Somebody arrived or left, and suddenly. I find myself a bit confused here. We've been talking past each other, because my impression is that we have had quite a lot of meetings at which we have all been consistently saying we would like to see a strategy set out for addressing the sort of inconsistencies that Gary was talking about in our bylaws, some of which are legacy bylaws where we have old Cumbrian and old Northwestern bylaws left over from nearly 11 years ago. And there is the reason why I think there is a difference, Stephen, between the list, which, as you say, you presented a list, and a strategy, is that within a strategy, you might say, this seems like an orderly sequence of events, but however, even though we're working on the first thing, in order that we're ready for doing the second thing, there are some wheels that we need to put in motion first. That's the difference between just having a sequential list and a strategy for approaching quite a significant area of work, is that you'll break it down into tasks that need to be performed over a sequence of time. And we've set ourselves at, I think in February of last year, the goal of trying to complete all of this by 2025. So we can say that this authority has, and the subcommittee has set that time frame, and that what I think we should be seeing then in terms of a strategy is that list and the tasks associated with addressing those bylaws set against that time frame, so that the resolution of achieving this by 2025 can be achieved without upsetting day-to-day working arrangements by individuals. Otherwise, it all ends up happening in a rush. It sounds to me as if we had that quite constructive meeting in December 2019, where a number of us got together to talk about the bylaw review. It sounds to me as if we probably need another of those in order that we can turn what currently is just a list into something that we could call a strategy. Otherwise, we could probably fill the rest of the day talking about what we think a strategy might be, which is not appropriate. So I would say then that if there's uncertainty amongst officers of what we mean when we say a strategy, that we all sit down and figure out what we think we mean by a strategy and what it actually looks like.
Thanks, Jim. I suppose a sensible suggestion might be for officers to use the work that was done as a result of the December meeting and the second meeting that was held in May, where a document was produced where we looked at each of the bylaws and the issues and the areas of concern and the overlap and where there were data gaps. That could be used by officers as a basis for forming a strategy. Joe, you had a comment?
Well,
Yeah,
go on, Joe.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I was just going to agree with that. I think that's an important point to refer back to. But if there's any sort of need for evidence on direction or to assist in the strategy of this in helping the committee, then I think that there is evidence in sanction reports, in offending, in the strategic risk assessment of fisheries, which is done every year, to analyse where we might need to be looking at regulation in terms of current bylaws or adaptation, development, But also, you know, in terms of anecdotal evidence from either members of the committee like Gary or consultation with stakeholders. I mean, Gary gave a very well worded example of an issue which, just to, you know, relieve Gary of any anxiety, I was automatically addressed by myself in looking at this issue, because it's completely outrageous and ridiculous in my opinion. So that's the sort of thing that we should be looking at. You know, I think there is a range of evidence out there that we can draw into this to give us good guidance in the strategy of this across a variety of bylaws. You know, for example, we're looking at vessel size, but is large vessels an issue that we have in our district? You know, there is data out there that we can use to analyse that.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I think all of that evidence and justification that can go into a strategy can then help inform members about which bylaws should be the priority. And we need that information in order to make those kind of decisions. Gary, you had your hand up a while ago. Do you still have a comment to make? And then I'll take a comment from Steve Brown.
Yeah, coming back in on the netting side of the conversation, the bylaw, from my own point of view, and probably my members' point of view, we don't want to find ourselves in a position, which I pointed out to Dave Dobson when he was the Chief Enforcement Officer, where there's a blanket rule in the north of the district and there's no blanket rule in the south of the district, where if we were to go and fish in the north of the district, we'd have to steam into Barrow, miss a tide, take gear off, put gear back on, go out, we'd miss the weather window, etc., etc. And it'd just be a complete nightmare. And then coming to bring the vessel size in for the bylaw, is that applicable just to the netting, the potting, or the whole of the vessel size issue, or is it just round one fishery?
It hasn't been decided yet. That was just kind of looking at the issue as a whole and trying to take into account all of those various things. And again, that's why we need this kind of strategy paper. Steve, did you want to comment?
Yeah, the problem with the netting bylaw is we all know what the problems are from the sea fisheries side, but we must remember these bylaws were originally forced upon us following very lengthy negotiations with the Environment Agency, and we have two sets of their bylaws to incorporate as well. So what we have to do, because we are looking at not what we want to do, but what it is possible to do under the legal framework that we are restrained by, the Salmon Act. And that means that what Joe needs to do, I'm hoping this is what he's doing, is send out his thoughts to members after the TSB or whatever has approved that. We can then look it through, and I know I have some ideas which I think will smooth things out, some supplementary matters, but you're not even then, you're also looking at the problem of interaction with the potting bylaw because of the new marking regulations. So we've now got 3 sets of marking regulations in place, or we will have once the potting bylaw is made. So it's an unholy mess at present, and we risk spending years trying to sort it out just to have the Environment Agency turn around and say, no, it's as fast as that. So what we've got to do is, one, look at what Joe's proposing, have a separate discussion, which is going to take hours amongst all those with the interest in it, see what we can get, and then find out if we're actually going to be allowed to do it, because it's a very real issue.
It might be useful to have someone from the Environment Agency
They need
in
to be
those
there.
discussions.
It needs to be somebody in authority. It needs to be. We've had lengthy problems with this over the last 30 odd years now. It's not simple. We need to find out what we want, then we have to find out what we are allowed to do, and then we can go ahead and do it. And we need to get on with it.
Thanks, Steve. Gary, without wanting to kind of draw this out into a long and protracted discussion, because I don't think we're going to resolve the netting bylaw today, Jim has proposed 2 resolutions. Are there any alternative resolutions, or are we happy to take a vote on those one by one?
Could I just, Emily, just ask that on the back of what Steve's just said there?
Yeah.
Just for somebody from the TSB or the main committee, perhaps, or even Stephen, to seek dialogue with the Environment Agency and having some sort of communication with this authority.
I've made a note of that as well. I think it would be probably the best idea for the officers to urge an Environment Agency rep to come to the future TSB meeting, or whatever meeting it is where we discuss this. Thanks, Joe. Stephen?
Yeah, I don't want to complicate it further. I'm still not clear where to go with a strategy paper apart from what Joe is doing. My suggestion would be that we take what Joe is doing in regards to the netting, which covers a review of a lot of bylaws. I mean, there are the whole list of netting bylaws, north and south of the district, plus interaction with vessel size. I think that is a big piece of work to chew on for the next few months. And I'm not clear where else to go with a strategy paper. Obviously, you're looking at me to produce that. And then, unless other officers can help me out, or members can help me out, frankly, I'm not sure where to go, because what I've produced several times has not triggered any discussion. It does show a list of all the bylaws that need to be reviewed and how they might be gathered.
Thank
gathered
you.
into
We
groups.
don't need to go over that again. I'm not sure how much more clear we can make it. I don't know, Brian, whether you're able to offer any additional clarity there.
Well, Chair, very briefly, I mean, in terms of assisting Stephen, Jim has made 2 proposals for a resolution, and the second of those is specifically to assist officers to actually put meat on the bones in terms of a strategy document. So we have resolutions there, proposed resolutions from Jim, which actually, I think, go somewhere, if not, or hopefully, a long way to assisting Stephen with the issues that he's identified and outlined to us.
Plus all of the documentation produced from the 2 separate review meetings. Jim?
I think it is clear that there is a need for members to provide guidance. I think there is no clearer look. I've been talking. I've been looking back through some of the paperwork, and the reason why we need a strategy becomes blindingly obvious. Frankly, it is that in May of last year, it was suggested in a report to this subcommittee that one of the priorities for consideration was a new bylaw for winkles, which is now not on the suggested next priorities any longer for some reason. Why? So this is where we need a strategy, so that we can all understand where the priorities are, that we don't waste time chasing after going off on wild goose chases, that we make the best use of the resources that we've got in an orderly and a considered manner. So obviously, if the officers need our assistance, that's our job as members, isn't it? So why don't we, as I suggested a while ago, take Joe up on his offer to progress the netting permit bylaw, bearing in mind, of course, the Environment Agency people may wish to be involved, as one thing. And the second thing, obviously, we should work together to assist Stephen to come up with a strategy. And that could involve, as we did in December 2019, having a group of members sitting down with officers, obviously not sitting down, doing a video conference with officers, in order to come up with a strategy to deliver our resolution of achieving this by 2025.
Great, thanks, Jim. So we'll move to formal proposal on each of those. So the first was for Joe's paper on the netting bylaw to come to May at TSB, proposed by Jim. Do we have a seconder for that? Brian? All of those in favour? All against? And any abstentions? Did you capture that, Anthony?
Yep, that was unanimous.
Yeah, great. And the second resolution is for us to work together as members to assist Stephen to produce a strategy document for the next meeting, proposed by Jim. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Seconded by Rob. All of those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? Again, I think that was unanimous. Anthony, did you record that?
Yep.
Great, thank you very much. So hopefully we can save any further discussions on the future bylaws for the interim and the next meeting. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, science report. Over to John.
Thanks, Emily. So science reports for information. It includes some of the recent staff changes since Mandy and Melanie have left, and some of the people that we've had move over to the science team. It also sets out the priorities for the upcoming months with reduced members of staff, as well as at the bottom of the report highlights the survey plan for this year. Happy to sort of take any questions on the report.
Great, thanks, John. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll come to members first. So, Rob.
There we go. Yeah, just a quick one with regards to Mandy and Melanie leaving. As a director of a company, when we have any staff changes, we're always very interested as to why people either depart, whether it's on good terms or whatever. But it's like we spoke a long while ago, I remember now, about there was going to be sort of exit interviews done with staff changes to see what the issues are as to why people are leaving, because the loss of two at the science department in a very, very short period of time is going to put a massive amount of pressure on you, John. Yeah, I don't know who to direct that to. Maybe that might be best going to Stephen. I don't know.
Stephen, have you got a comment?
Yes, I mean, as I said before, recruitment is not. We have to be careful because we went way out of line at the last meeting talking about a recruitment issue, and I don't want to talk in detail here about recruitment. Yes, we do conduct exit interviews where appropriate. I mean, obviously, I can't divulge any of the contents of that here. But we do endeavour to find out why people have left, and it's for various reasons. And actually, there's a bit on Mandy and Melanie set out in the science report that they agreed for me to say.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just we're not looking for any detailed information. I'm just just want to make sure that, like, obviously Mandy's knowledge for starters is there's quite a few years of what she's learned has sort of not necessarily gone down the pan, but like I said, there's a lot of pressure now on it's a big area, and for him to know everything about everything it's a lot of pressure.
Thanks, Rob.
I believe John will grow into the task.
Well, step up to the mark, especially if he's on double time, yeah?
Thanks. Stephen, if I may, without straying too far into the realms of recruitment that we don't want to get too involved in, I just wanted to say that I hadn't seen the science officer position advertised that you mentioned, and obviously with the forthcoming appointment of the senior scientist, I just wanted to point out really that members have quite significant networks of people that we know and would be welcome to send on details for us to promote really within our networks to ensure that we get the good reach for that appointment.
The advert for science officers took place a little while ago, quite early on in COVID lockdown. For a long time, science team were quite reluctant to advance the recruitment, but we had quite a lot of applications back in May, June time, I think, and we progressed those through to interview recently. And we've made an appointment, and we expect to be able to make an announcement quite soon on the science officer post. As I think I've said in the science report, I wrote that bit on staff changes for the report. Obviously, we can't recruit the other science officer post until we've resolved the issue of the senior scientist. So we will be advertising for a senior science post, hopefully in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Stephen. So yeah, just to reiterate, we're happy to send on the advert if you have it circulated to members. Jim?
Sorry, I was going to say, Steve, when you said hopefully in the next few weeks, I hope sincerely that it's more than hoping it'll be in the next few weeks, because Mandy left in, when was it, December, and it's now February. So given the schedule that there is going to be, then presumably, come the springtime, things start really kicking off. And I would have thought the goal should be to have as close to a full complement as you can in the staff, in the science team, by April, May time. Again, this might not be a TSB issue, so maybe this is something that TSB ought to just say we are anxious about, and maybe, since you reminded me I'm on finance and HR, I'll take that anxiety across the finance and HR perhaps, I don't know.
As I say, we have a job description and papers prepared for a senior science officer post, and I hope it will be advertised in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be. I think we can achieve that. Then obviously you've got to get applications in and go through to interview and all the rest of it, so it takes a while. But I also would like to have someone in post as a senior scientist by March, April time, in order to join in the survey program. If we don't, we will keep the survey program going using IFCOs, using assistance from Joe's team to do the essential survey work that we need to do.
Brian?
Yeah, very quickly, Chair. I'm very, very conscious of the delegations to Stephen as Chief Executive in terms of recruitment of staff. I think the anxiety or concern expressed by members is because we can potentially see how the shortage of staff resources impacts on the actual delivery of policy in terms of our day-to-day work. And anecdotally, what I would say is, since I've joined the authority, I have noticed that the highest staff turnover is amongst the science team. Now, that may be a function of scientists who move because of career progression or because of learning opportunities or career development opportunities. I understand that. But I think what I would like to say is, just building on Jim's comments, could he please, as Vice Chair and also member of the relevant subcommittee, raise this issue in terms so that the authority can have a better understanding and so that we can be better equipped to actually retain staff going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Brian. Moving on, does anyone have any further comments on the report, Jim?
Actually, sorry, at the risk of going over the same point, I was just going to say, I don't know how you're proposing to conduct interviews, Stephen, but if any of us as members, if you need us on an interview panel, I'm sure there will be plenty of us helpful, happy to help out. Certainly I'd be happy to help if I can be of any assistance.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. We've had quite a bit of interviewing to do recently. We've obviously interviewed a number of science officers. We've interviewed a number of clerk officers as well. And indeed, we've appointed IFCOs too. So we have been doing quite a lot of recruitment, and we're quite under-resourced when it comes to doing the level of recruitment that we've been challenged with over the last few months. I think officers have to lead on it. We can draw in members to sit in and ensure fair play and that sort of thing, and we've done that in the past. But at the moment we haven't any interviews outstanding. We're just making some decisions and getting people in post at the moment.
Paul and then Brian.
Chair, yes, insofar as the recruitment processes and particularly interviews are concerned, I think where those posts are of a highly technical nature, I bow to Jim's superior knowledge. If I was being asked to attend an interview for somebody in the science team, I think Jim would be far better equipped than me. So I surrender to him if anybody's needed to assist.
Thanks, Paul. Brian?
Yeah, just to say, Chair, that I'm happy to assist, probably more in terms of any of Joe's team from a legal perspective, but I'm happy to help out.
Great, thanks, Brian. Rob?
Just looking in the little bit further on in the science report, Annex A with regards to the survey schedule. With what's going on in DEFRA and the likes at the moment, it's basically giving a big issue towards the shellfish industry, as in cockles and mussels and the likes. Just wondering if there's, it may be something to bear in mind. We may need to look at changing the closed period, because as it stands at the moment, having cockles, for instance, open after December is not very good from an industry perspective. And I do believe that the only reason why we had the opening from September through till April was just to satisfy the live market. So it may be a thing that we need to look at bringing forward the opening time, so it's more in line with everywhere else in the country, as in sort of maybe it's June or July opening, because as it is at the moment, instead of the guys basically working an 8-month season, they're down to 4. Just something to bear in mind.
Thanks, Rob. If it's kind of relating to the next item on the agenda, I might suggest that we take any discussions around that in the following item, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Just wanted to thank John for a really useful report, and seeing that survey schedule and the priorities was really helpful to have that laid out. Are there any other comments from members? Trevor?
Okay, sorry about that. Just coming back to the previous discussion about interviews. I sometimes get invited on to interviews when it comes to the final sifting. People like, oh, excuse me. on mute forever, then as soon as you unmute, that happens. Sorry about that. And it's quite interesting in that if you're from industry, you can actually be encouraged to formulate a curveball question, which really does sort out the individuals that are applying for the post. And I would equally be happy, as per Jim, Brian, to have any input to any interviews that may be taking place. Coming back to Rob's somewhat premature point, possibly, yeah, why have we got these regulations in place when they don't revolve around the biology of the beast? It should be addressed differently. That's me.
Thanks, Trevor. I'm sure the officers will appreciate all the offers for support as well with the recruitment.
Yes, perhaps I could just come and say thanks to members for offering to help. Certainly, if we need anything, we will look for people with the relevant expertise for the particular post and draw them in if we can.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Any further comments on the science reports? Jim?
Just a quick one. The one that caught my eye, I mean, there's a lot going on and all focusing on you, John, of course. So this is not a suggestion that will hopefully add to your workload. It's just a query. I only just spotted it, actually. An awful lot of the science team's work has been around habitats, regulations, assessments, and all that sort of thing. I noticed that the government is, now we've left the EU, is looking to make some changes there. To what extent might the changes affect workload? And also, to what extent does any consultation on the changes affect workload? Do you have a view there, John? Because this could be, if there's a consultation, it could be of great significance both to the authority and to the fishermen within the district.
Consultation on the underpinning legislation, is that what you're?
Yeah, I don't know, because I only just spotted it, so I don't quite know what I've just gone to followed the link, so apologies, I missed it on my first read through. But do you have any sort of, a very quick understanding of what's likely to happen here?
From my understanding, having a read through it, that from our point of view, not a lot would change in terms of the fisheries. I don't know if maybe Lawrence would be just as well placed or better placed to comment on how the changes to the regulations would affect us. But from my understanding, looking at what's been proposed, that there's nothing that would actually change our assessments as such going forward.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, just to back John up on that in terms of the requirements under the Habitats Directive, what was and what's been transcribed into sort of retained UK law is the whole intent of that process has been to retain those processes as they are, not to introduce anything new. So we're pretty much working to the same rule book, if you like, that we were before, which is useful for people like John.
Stephen?
Well, just to pick up on what Jim said about the amount of work that the habitats regulations takes, I've just had calls with the changes in the science team over the last few months to sort of reflect on it. And obviously, since the European Marine Site, the new policy, as they called it, came in 2012, and we've had to look at all the sites and all the activities and the impacts of all of them. The amount of work which arises from the Habitats Directive, Birds Directive, is absolutely immense, and it is one of the main areas of work now that the science team has to deliver. Every fishery that we're considering opening needs a substantial document to consider the impacts that the fishery might have, and to show that in fact it won't have any impacts on any of the features for the site where the fishery is taking place. Nearly all our fisheries take place in habitat sites, and the amount of work is you can't underestimate the amount of work now that is derived from the Habitats Directive, and you know, the size of the science team now 4 people, whereas 10 years ago it was only 1 person. That reflects the amount of work that we have to do and will have to do in the future. So it's just to let members know that Jim is absolutely right. The amount of work is huge and it's not going to decline. To some extent, we have streamlined, or John and Mandy managed to streamline the process of doing the habitats regulations assessments, but it's still a very big piece of work, something that the authority has a statutory duty to fulfill. If we don't do it, no fishery is open. So we absolutely have to do the habitats regulations assessments.
Thanks, Stephen. Any further comments? I just wanted to say it was good to see that some progress is being made on the mussel management plan, and that science officers are working with Natural England to progress that. Obviously, it's a shame that it won't be in place for this year's management of the mussel fisheries, but obviously look forward to seeing some further progress on that, and hope that we can manage the fisheries appropriately this year. Any further comment on science report before we move on? No. So moving on to a verbal report from the Chief Executive on Brexit impact on fisheries.
Sorry, the mute problem. No, I haven't got a lot to say at all. It just occurred to me quite late on that probably we ought to give opportunity to discuss this at the TSB, mainly because of the situation that's arisen over that Rob Benson first raised to me. I mean, I thought we had a solution to the problem of exporting live shellfish, in the sense that we thought we had a commitment from DEFRA that it would be resolved by April 2021. And that after that things would revert to normal. Then Rob had this communication from the Commission a couple of weeks ago, which seemed to completely change that. They're now saying that there isn't going to be a resolution, that the established law that Europe won't take live shellfish from any third country, any non-member state. That is a law that will need to be changed in order to get a solution to this problem. I mean, I still believe that where there's a will, there's a way, in the sense that if people put their backs into this problem and get together and talk it through, they ought to be able to find a solution, and they must find a solution. But it is a very serious problem. At the moment, there won't be any cockle and mussel fisheries for the foreseeable future from northwest England, because all the catch has to go for cooking, for boiling, canning, bottling, or whichever it is. And that is a much less valuable catch. And Trevor's shaking his head, and I understand it's not a solution. So if anybody wants to raise any more about that, or report any further developments, or tell me what the position is, by all means do, and we'll record it. I think we did very well, actually, in stirring up the issue after Rob had raised it. We put out a lot of concerns. We've sent it to DEFRA. They are aware of it, but they haven't done anything about it yet. So does anybody want to say anything more about Brexit impact on fisheries at the moment?
Jim? And then Trevor?
I was just going to say, I'm sure there are some very heartfelt views. The issue in my mind is this is a forum where we can air some views. I think we should focus on what the authority could or should do. My understanding is it's not the role of the authority to stir things up in this regard, but I think it is appropriate for us to, if it is the nature of the discussion, to express to the government the heartfelt views of members of the authority. But we're not, of course, a lobbying group. So if I might just quickly declare an interest and then give a quick advertisement, the body that is there to stir things up and represent the interests of shellfishermen is the Shellfish Association of Great Britain, of which I am a member. And anybody that isn't ought to dip their hand in their pocket and join up, because I am aware that they are doing a huge amount of work to try and address this issue. Public notice over. I'll shut up.
Thanks, Jim. Trevor?
Yeah, well said, Jim. It's a trade association, and as such, it punches above its weight. One of the ladies from the Shellfish Association was on that esteemed radio programme, PM, on Radio 4 last night, talking with Evan Davis about this problem, and she got it absolutely right. The problem is classification, water classification, and that's something that, as an industry, we have been engaging with since day one, since the inception of the hygiene regulations. Well, under EU legislation, we're entitled to A-grade classification as a designated shellfish water. And that's what we need to be progressing in tandem at the moment with the Food Standards Agency. In Scotland, they adopted the right approach, as did the rest of the coastal states in the EU. Okie dokie, here we go, here's a new legislation. We've got A-class waters, end of. Yeah? And they worked towards achieving that very quickly. We were A-class status in the Menai Strait year before last. We confidently expected to get it last year. Nope. Because of COVID, we couldn't actually give the EHOs samples of water or shellfish to be tested. And therefore, because we didn't give the requisite number of samples to the EHOs, we fell back into B classification, purely and simply on that basis. We are not B classification. We're A to all intents and purposes. And I think the sooner we get joined up approach to water classification amongst the devolved administration, similar to what the Scots have done, the sooner, the better everybody will be. This will cover cockles as well as mussels. And you know, Jim's quite right. We need to flag up the concerns of our constituents who make a living from this trade to the SAGB, to the government, and leave it there. That's all we can do as an association. And I do have an interest in this, obviously.
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, and thanks to Stephen, Rob, Jim, Trevor for raising these issues and kind of keeping members in the loop. I wonder, without kind of straying into the lobbying side of things, if there are any kind of actions that we can take as an authority. Obviously, Rob mentioned an issue in the previous agenda item. I wonder whether it's appropriate to come back to that now. Rob?
Yeah, no, it was just a thought, you know, at the end of the day, if that's going to be the be all and end all with regards to the live market scenario, because it's not to say that you can't send product. You can send product, you can purify it, which we've got the ability to purify shellfish, but that's not what the customer wants, because if we purify it, by the time it gets to the customer, it's eaten into a lot of its shelf life just in the 2 to 3 days travel on a truck. You know, and at the end of the day, customers want quality, and the way that they've been getting quality for the past however long we've been sending stuff is by sending it as a raw product. So, you know, if that sort of grinds to a halt, I just see the fact that yeah, we definitely need to look towards the opening and closing times of the actual fisheries to see if yeah, if we can work with nature for it to allow us to continue to do other things at different times.
Thanks, Rob. Trevor?
Amazing. Rob raises a very good point, and quite rightly so. This is a trade that's gone on for generations, if not centuries, and all of a sudden for it to end like this is quite ridiculous. All our customers in Europe are bringing pressure to bear on their relevant authorities to reinstate the trade. But a major concern to me is coming back to the science plan, is that we won't have possibly not the requisite resources to throw at assessment of stocks this year. And I think that should be prioritised. And forgive me if you've already dealt with this in my absence, but certainly in terms of the work plan of the authority scientists, given their very short-handed nature, I'm sure you've already mentioned this. I would hope that survey work needs to be foremost this year in the work scheme of the scientists. I'd have thought. Yes, there's an awful lot of work to be done with all the requirements of the designation, but we do need to prioritise, notwithstanding this, what I see as a temporary glitch to trade, what's going on the ground and keeping that record ongoing within the records of the authority. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. I think John's report highlights really well how the survey work is the priority for the science team. I don't know if you want to say anything extra before I take a comment from Steve. John?
Yeah, just the science programme is as it was last year with the same requirements, and we will look to fulfil these this year. Coming back to Rob's comment on the change of the close season, that is in place for the protection of spat and has been for a number of years. Well, that's what it says in the bylaw, and that's we did have discussions around that at the last when bylaw 3, the current bylaw 3 was being drafted. If we need to look into that, then we will have to obviously take those conservation considerations into account.
I'll just take a comment from Steve. He's been waiting a while. I'll come back to Rob and Trevor.
Right, just to back up Rob, I think Jim will remember all this lot as well. The close season for cockles was brought in for the northwestern SFC part of the district, and it was an answer to many and numerous problems that were occurring in Morecambe Bay at the time. Now, one thing that came out of all that at the time was that while the close season was perhaps appropriate for Morecambe Bay, it wasn't appropriate for other areas, particularly at that time was the D. Now, what I would suggest, since it's not going to be easy to take that out of the bylaw that we've just put in, is that we do what we've done in the past, and that is to take a realistic local view on the different fisheries. I will bring the Ribble one up as an example, where we had to do a clearance because of massive stock loss due to displacement, and simply issue the relative permits to, let's face it, quite a small number of people who now hold permissions to gather shellfish within the district. It isn't the situation we had when that closure was first brought in, where we were talking about several hundred, if not thousands, in the area. It's a totally different situation. Whether the closure is scientifically valid in that season over the whole of the district, I can only question. I'm not a scientist. I don't think we can take it out of the bylaw. So let's take a pragmatic way forward and simply agree at some stage, when necessary and subject to the habitats regulations, that we will simply issue to holders of bylaw 3 permits a sub-permit, just as we did in the Ribble and have done at other periods when necessary. There you go, just a suggestion to get out of it and hopefully answer a few questions.
Thanks, Steve. I might just ask Joe to comment there if possible. I was just wondering, in bylaw 3, forgive me, I can't remember, is the closed season a flexible permit condition, or is it on the face of the new bylaw in the one that's awaiting approval?
I have to get the bylaw out to look.
I couldn't answer that off the top of my head. Stephen should be. I've had very little to do with the new bylaw 3, to be honest, Emily. I think Stephen would be better answering that question.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Stephen?
I think the core closed season is not in the flexible permits. I think it's on the face of the bylaw, but we have taken into the bylaw the provisions of what is at the present bylaw 13A, which does allow us to make openings and closings according to circumstances.
Yes.
We will have provision to do that. Yeah, you got a comment, Anthony?
Yeah, I've got the bylaw up. There's the line: a person must not fish for any cockle on or between 1st of May to 31st of August in the same year, unless permitted by a flexible permit condition. So it does allow us that out.
So it's actually in both. Yes, I'd forgotten how we worded it exactly, but yeah, we will be able to allow fishing at other times.
We have done that on a number of occasions in recent. Anyway.
Quite often. Yeah.
Thanks for confirming that. I'll just come to Trevor and then Rob and Kelsey for a comment.
Thanks, Chair. I realise I've been absent for a while, but I was looking through the science report. It's a real shame, but understandable, that we won't be able to progress a mussel management plan this year. I'd just like to really make a plea for this being priority when we get back to a more equitable footing in terms of science and officer availability. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. Rob?
And I think what Steve Brown was saying there pretty much covers what I wanted to say, but it was just a case of I wanted to bring it to light rather than sort of we get to the next meeting and it's like, oh, look, we need to do this immediately. You know, we need to bear this in mind as for you know, what's going on with regards to the communication that's going backwards and forwards between DEFRA and the EU, yeah. Because you know, what we would prefer is as was, but if we can't have as was, we can't have just a 4-month season, yeah.
Thanks, Rob. Kelsey?
Yes, I just wanted to say the same as Rob and Steve, whatever, that in these unprecedented times, that to support any of the businesses in our area, I think the IFCA needs to do whatever it can within its remit to help that. Otherwise, there's not going to be any businesses and not going to be anything for the IFCA to deal with. So I really think that if any of the industry members have an idea or want something, like Rob Benson wants to open a fishery there, he should drop an email in to the IFCA, and I think it should be a priority of the science team to see if they can accommodate it. That was it.
Thanks, Kelsey. Jim?
I was just going to echo exactly what Kelsey said. I mean, there is a great risk here of the IFCA getting egg on its face, isn't there? Is that, frankly, in this sort of dispute between the UK and the EU at the moment, there's no way of quite working out who's done what and when it might be resolved. But if, let's say, for instance, that the original DEFRA thoughts that this would be resolved sometime in April were to happen, then between now and April, no cockle or mussel fisherman is going to make a penny. And for the cockle fishermen, the moment that if in April the live bivalve mollusk issue is resolved, they're going to be lucky to get any fishing done before the IFCA closure hits them, which would make us look, well, probably very unpopular. But also, given that nobody is going to be fishing for any significant quantity of cockles in the interim, all things being equal, there ought to be more cockles around in April than we might, or the end of April, than we might otherwise have expected there to be. So there could be the opportunity, as has just been described, to give people a chance to make some money if the live bivalve mollusk thing is sorted out at a time of year when ordinarily these shellfish beds would be closed. So I would have thought, out of all of this discussion, that is the one thing that we can, as an authority, make preparations to do. And that might require, as we've just been talking about, habitats regulations assessment, although all the birds should have cleared off, so hopefully that wouldn't be too onerous. Those sorts of things, because it would be, how daft are we going to look, frankly, if the moment people can gather cockles, we tell them they can't. I think it would be very unfortunate. So bearing in mind the limited resources we have, if we can look at planning for that, I think that would be great.
Thanks, Jim. I'll just take a comment from Gary and then perhaps ask the officers to respond. Gary?
Yeah. This Brexit is what an absolute fiasco. It's a nightmare, to be quite honest with you. I've had 2 phone calls off 2 separate fishermen. One fishing in the north of the district, and he's a pretty biggish concern as regards his investment. And I said to him about this, all the paperwork and the legalities of it, and he referred back to originally when we went into the EU and the common fisheries policy, which would be what, 25, 30 years ago. He said all this paperwork was in force then, but because we were a member, they didn't really enforce it and it became very lax. And now we're not in the common fisheries policy, we're not in the EU. Basically, they've reverted back to where we were initially, but they're obviously using us, this country, as an example to any other countries. This is what you're going to get if you do what Britain did. And then I had another chap ring me who fishes in the south of the district, and he said that he'd had a phone call from one of the main shellfish buyers in Fleetwood telling him that the market price of whelks was going to drop. Well, it had dropped to £1 a kilo. And he said, basically, he said it's not viable. He said, because when we're paying 80-85p for brown crab, plus the other bait to go in the pot, he said the return just isn't there, because the time you took into consideration running costs, fuel, bait, etc., etc., he just said, we might as well just throw the towel in, to be honest with you. And then he come back to us and said, well, if he was to sell his boat and downscale his operation, he was wanting to know if it would be possible to transfer his track record from his existing vessel to a smaller vessel. And I said, well, that's for the Northwest IFCA committee to decide. But I said, I'll put it forward at the TSB meeting and see what sort of, if there's any solution. It's all up in the air at the minute, really, to be honest with you. But that was 2 comments from 2 separate fishermen, one in the north, one in the south. And they asked me to put it forward, so I have done.
Great, thanks, Gary. Could you just confirm, sorry, I was trying to take notes as well at the same time, was that specifically for whelk or for? Well,
the first comment was, he's actually a shell fisherman, his biggest concern with his own boat, and he buys shellfish in and retails it as well. And then the other second comment was from an individual fisherman who works out of Fleetwood.
On whelk? Yeah,
on whelks, yeah, that's his sole fishery, yeah. Or his priority fishery.
With that regard, I don't see why an application couldn't be made under the appeals procedure for the whelk potting permit. Correct me if I'm wrong, John or Stephen.
So just clarify, what does he want to do? Transfer the
To transfer the track record from
Yeah,
one vessel
what
to
it is,
another.
John, is in the light of A&M's, well, not pulling the plug on the whelk fishery, as in buying the whelks and processing them, just the actual fact that the price has dropped to a point where it's not actually viable to run that boat on that fishery. He was on about downscaling his fishery, the boat and everything appertaining to it, and going single-handed. And he wanted to know if he could transfer the track record off the existing vessel to his new vessel if he goes ahead with what his intentions are. He just said, would I ask the question?
Yeah, well, without getting into too much specific detail about his actual application, there is the ability to transfer track record from one vessel to the other within the bylaw. So he just needs to amend his application and send it in to us, and then we can have a look at it. So,
right, smashing. Yeah. I'll pass that on. Thank you.
And presumably, if he was downsizing to an under 10 metre vessel, he wouldn't need track record anyway. There'd be the 400 pot limit.
If he wanted to fish 1,000 pots, he would still need to provide the track record. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any comments on the first query that Gary raised? No, thank you for bringing those to us, Gary. I just wondered, just to come back to the issue and the suggestions raised by members around the cockle fisheries. Would officers be able to comment on the possibility of kind of making preparations now for potential work to undertake HRAs and relevant dispensations if the situation arose? John, sorry, Joe.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I fully understand the issues that members are raising and fishermen, and unfortunately myself, I was talking about these back in 2017 with the National Fishermen's Federation. I don't really know what to say, to be honest. I fully support looking at how we can, assist our stakeholders in some ways, but I think that there needs to be the scientific justification for that, and not just the fact that people haven't been able to work for the last 4 months, so let's open all the fisheries. I think we need to be very clear about that. You know, this is absolutely tragic what has happened to the industry. I have been sick to the core since the 1st of January with this issue. I find it very hard to talk about in some respects, actually. It makes me that angry. But I think that we need to be careful not to operate outwith of the circumstances that are in front of us with the regulations that we have, because I think that could come back and bite us if it's seen that we've in some ways, just opened the doors because of what's happened. At the end of the day, the crux of this matter is an environmental legislation issue, not a fisheries issue. There aren't issues with our fisheries, and I think we need to be clear on that. This is an issue with transportation of shellfish around the environmental health regulations in place and a lack of correlation with the standards in the European Union at the minute. So I think we need to be mindful of that, and if the science is there to show that the stocks would allow that and would be not damaging on the conservation requirements of those fisheries, then yeah, obviously, but I think that we need to have clear science and justification for doing that.
Thanks, Joe. John?
Just going back to the stock point of view, I'm not sure we would have the data to permit just extended the open period longer without having to do a full suite of surveys on the beds to see what stock exists. Just to highlight that, really.
That's John's very eloquently put what my feelings are there.
Yeah, because obviously in the survey plan, cockle surveys are mainly scheduled for July. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So any changes would have to, bring the whole survey schedule forward and potentially clash with when we typically do mussel surveys in sort of May, June time.
Are there any other comments or suggestions? Rob?
Yeah, I think it's quite important to be half full rather than half empty on the glass. Yeah, because you know, it's only been suggested, and already, you know, we've got two of you that are looking down the negative road. Let's just turn this around a little bit. Yeah. Look at it from a monetary point of view, because that's where we need to be. You know, obviously I have got an interest, you know, not wanting to put the pressure back towards you guys, but we don't have anybody that's putting money into our bank every month. Whereas, you know, you guys have got wages coming in on a monthly basis. That's, you know, the top and bottom of it.
Could I perhaps suggest that maybe the officers, enforcement and science officers could have a discussion outside this meeting and maybe send an email back to TSB? Jim?
Sorry, press the wrong button then. I took my hand down instead of unmuting myself. Twit. Sorry, I don't want to go over what I said earlier, but just bear in mind that if this were to pan out such that in April or in May or at some point during our close season, the export controls on live bivalve molluscs are sorted out, we'll have a situation for this authority where the Wash fishery will be open, the Thames fishery will be open for cockles, probably others elsewhere in the country will be open, and we will be shut. And this is foreseeable at this point. And whilst respecting everything that John and Joe have said about staff resources, if at the moment, several months or 2 months at least ahead of seeing a problem potentially down the road, we can see it, we want to be able to find a way to address it. Now, I'm sure, going back to sort of earlier comments, that those of us that are members that can help will no doubt help if it's a question of getting people on beaches to help with surveys or anything like that. I'm sure there's lots of people willing to help out. But out of this discussion, given the role and status of this authority, we're not a trade or association, we're not a lobbying group or anything like that. It is not for us to get on DEFRA's case about this. It's not our job. But we can see trouble down the road. And I would say, again, if we can see trouble down the road, we should be thinking about how we can address that. If it turns out we can't, and we can't, but please, let's have a good look at it.
Trevor?
Yeah, can I just reinforce Jim's statement, because it is the duty of the authority in its vision to do exactly that, to lead, champion and manage the benefits to ensure healthy seas, sustainable fisheries and a viable industry. It's there in our constitution, it's our remit to do this. So let's bear that in mind in the coming weeks.
John and then Brian.
I just thought I'd highlight, I'm happy to look at this. I'm not being negative as such. It's just where some of the sticking points may be. I was just trying to highlight them going forward.
Thanks, John. Brian?
Yeah, very quickly, Chair. I'm just wondering, I don't know the history, but is there any prior examples of the industry in terms of the people who are actually employed collecting shellfish? Is there any history or examples where they've assisted officers to actually do certain tasks within the survey programme on the beach, as it were? Is there any example of that? Is it possible? Because given the resource issues that have been explained in detail to us, any help or assistance to me would seem a really good thing. And the people involved in the industry have a vested interest in ensuring that the information is available to allow informed and scientific decisions to be made in due course should they be required.
John?
Yeah, I think every year we work with industry where we can, and we've got a long-standing history of that, especially on some of the mussel beds. We take industry data, providing it's to a certain level that we can sort of scrutinise, and going forwards we'd always work with industry, and I think this year's no different to previous years.
Stephen?
I would just say I don't think Joe or John intended to be negative about this at all. I think they very much will make every effort to put in place everything that needs to be done. If the situation changes and we need to bring forward the survey work, bring forward the habitats regulations assessments, clearance for natural link, the whole programme needs to be brought forward. We will make every effort to do that. That may mean that other survey work in that long list that you've got in the science report may have to be rescheduled or delayed as well. But we can be flexible and light on our feet when it comes to these sorts of things, and we will make every effort if the situation changes and requires us to act, and we'll make every effort to do so.
Thanks, Stephen. It's good to hear. I suppose the concerns coming from members are to think about these things now and not necessarily at the last minute when we might get a decision. But it's good to hear that officers are supportive of that. Any further comments on this item? No. So moving on to, oh sorry, was that on this item, Jim?
It was. Have we clearly resolved something that we want? Having had an interesting discussion, what are we doing as a consequence of the discussion?
I noted down an action, but I didn't get a firm feeling from the officers that they were wanting to take necessarily that forward now. I don't know whether it's for the officers to say whether they feel they have the scope to kind of make some early preparations to look at what would need to be done in terms of HRAs and relevant dispensation survey work adjustments. John?
Just some clarity, because I think there's like two proposals there as such, one to extend the current open season and then one to look at opening in July and cut the season short. Just, are we looking at both options or one or the other, or some clarity on that?
What I think, if I might, an awful lot is going to depend on what happens next, isn't it? Let's be honest, and we haven't the foggiest what's going to happen next. Given what Stephen said, that the authority can be light on its feet, well, it can, but of course is bound by rules of procedure. And if it is decided that it would be useful to, even just on a one-off basis, adjust the cockle close seats, then our opportunity for doing that, if things were to change in April, our opportunity to doing that will be our March quarterly meeting. So it would seem to me that if we are to be responsive in that way, that some kind of proposal, and here I don't mean a necessarily onerous thing, but something that said, if, just for the sake of argument, DEFRA or the UK and EU resolve the issue on live bivalve mollusk exporting in April or May, and we were to do this sort of thing, here is what it would entail. And maybe also come March, if we are to do this, because it's a substantial thing to do in terms of changing our regulatory regime, you need a resolution to back it up so that it mandates officers doing something appropriate. Otherwise, if we wait until our next TSB meeting, chances are we will be then stuck right in the middle. If that happens, if in April or May, the dispute is sorted, then by the time we get to our next TSB meeting, we'll be right in the thick of a problem where Gary and Rob and all the people that want to go and gather cockles will be kicking off saying, just at the moment our problem is solved, you give us a headache. And that will then become a more difficult environment in which to operate. Right now, I would suggest that we put together a clear sort of methodology, if you like, for if we are going to do this, here's what we should do. By the time we get to the March quarterly meeting, we'll have a clearer view, I hope, of how this is likely to pan out. And it could be that it's such a disaster area we don't need to do a thing. Or it could be that a solution is on the cards and we then need to implement our plan. But if we haven't got our plan, then we're going to be having this discussion again in March from square one. I'd like us to be a few steps ahead so that come March, given everything that's happened, John and Joe and Stephen can say, right, members, if you want to do this, to alter the cockle close season, we need to do this, 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 this. Are you all happy for us to do it? And we'll say yay or nay, bingo, you're off. And we don't have to have this discussion all over again and invent the wheel all over again. I think it's fairly clear what the risk is here, and that, on a single sheet of A4, you could probably come up with these are the steps that we would need to follow through so that we would be ready to go in March. And I think that would just be pragmatic from our point of view. The future's uncertain. Let's not invest a huge amount of time and effort in it, but let's just take a precaution to make sure we're ready for this eventuality. It's going to go one of two ways, isn't it? Either nothing will change and you can't take live bivalve mollusks, or it is going to change and you can. Well, let's be ready for that.
Thanks, Jim. Does that seem like a feasible proposal for officers to bring a paper to the March meeting, Joe?
I fully agree with everything Jim said there, and it's not my team to decide on the capacity for the survey, although IFCOs always have assisted with surveys. That's what we do, and that helps the program get through. And I fully understand comments from Rob and Trevor about, this is what the IFCA is here to do, champion, lead sustainable fisheries. I just feel slightly that Jim made a comment there about reinventing the wheel, that I feel that under unprecedented times of doing this, is this the committee suggesting that this is a one-off opportunity where, under unprecedented circumstances of Brexit, that at some point during the summer we reduce this year's close season and anticipate there could be risks of damage to stock for sustainability on next year's season? Is that a risk that we're willing to take?
Joe, sorry, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is come up with a plan. I'm not saying take the decision ahead of executing the plan, but if we just roll on without even thinking about the possibility of what might need to be done to adjust the close season, but we will have this discussion all over again in March and then all over again in May. We've had this discussion. It's been a worthwhile discussion. Let's capitalize on the thoughts that have been shared so that at the March meeting, if it is looking like one of the possibilities is still that the UK and EU will sort out this issue about live bivalve mollusks, that we've got a plan that we can execute, which might conclude exactly what you've said. It might conclude, terribly sorry, everyone, there's not enough cockles out there, or the population structure is such that it is just not sensible to do this because we'll screw you for next year. And that's fine. I'm not prejudging the outcome. What I'm saying is, please, we've had, I don't want to go right back to the beginning of the meeting, but how many times have we talked about the strategy for bylaw review? Let's not do the same thing of just repeatedly coming back to the same issue as if it's the first time we've seen it. Let's take this issue now and move it on a step. And in this case, we can see that a possibility, there might be other possibilities, of course, a possibility of responding to this situation could be that we alter our close season this year, because as you say, Joe, it's unprecedented. And I'm saying no more than that about the close season. But if we don't resolve to do that now and resolve that something should go to the March meeting, then we're going to be playing catch up for the rest of the year. So let's not do that. Let's take the decision now, I would move, to make a bit of a plan so that we can respond to the situation as the stock would require, and maybe shift our close season, maybe by a week, maybe by a month, maybe by 2 months. I don't know by how much, because we haven't done the stock survey. But let's be ready for that. That's all I'm saying.
And I can, just to finish before Emily Jackie weavers us all, I absolutely agree 100% with what you'd said, Jim, and that's where I was getting to. I fully agree with that. Planning is absolutely crucial, but I do feel that we are discussing a core function of our management around cockle fisheries here, which is that close season. And I think we need to be mindful of that as a discussion alongside what you have just said, because I think that has implications for the current Bylaw 3 and the new iteration of Bylaw 3, and was mentioned by Rob before, you know, at other points of this meeting of the close season. What's the science behind it? Why have we got that? And I think we have that justification. We're talking, you know, the wash fishery, the D have all been mentioned. I think they're very different fisheries, but fully agree we need to be mindful of that and work on this management and strategic process which you've suggested.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I totally agree. Without prejudgment of what the outcome may be, it may be that survey work is done, or, you know, HRA says that there cannot be any amendments, but we should certainly plan for that. So there's a proposal from Jim then for officers to put together.
Emily,
yes.
Gary had his hand up for quite
Sorry,
a while.
Gary.
Yeah, being a Bylaw 3 permit holder, doing both cockles and mussels at the present time, due to the circumstances we found ourselves in, I take on board Rob Benson's point of view, Jim Andrews, but as a fisherman, you want the most for your product, and as Jim Andrews has pointed out, that if this is resolved, that the Thames, the Wash, etc., the D, they all come online and they're all sending a product abroad, that it'll drive the price of our product in this district down. So therefore, we don't want to be giving a product away that's of a high value for a lesser price just to try and compete with everybody else. I just wanted to make that point to make sure that everybody's, like, you know, aware of that situation that will arise.
Great, thanks, Gary. So just moving forward then on Jim's proposal, so to confirm, that was to put together, for the officers to put together a plan or methodology if the need arises to undertake interim surveys, HRAs and what have you, to assess whether there may be the ability to change the close season for cockles. Unless you want to phrase that in any more succinct way, Jim. Sorry, you're on mute.
I was just sad, if necessary, at the end.
Yeah. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Kelsey? All of those in favour? I might remind people actually at this point that perhaps it's advisable to note your interest and not vote if you have a declared interest in this item. All of those against? And any abstentions? Abstentions from Gary, Rob and Trevor. Did you miss that vote? You just come back. take it you're abstaining because of your declared interest. Yeah, great. Did you capture that, Anthony?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Moving on to any other business then. There was one item of any other business raised by the Chief Executive this morning around Save Our Sea Bass.
Yes, there was something posted on a Save Our Sea Bass website over the weekend that asserted that the authority has been acting in secret with government and other interests to advance the case for looser restrictions on the netting of bass. We simply haven't, and I don't know where they've got this from, whether they've just made it up themselves or whether they've picked up something that's been misunderstood, or even whether some, an officer or a member might have said something which might have caused the confusion. But we've put a refutation, a rebuttal on the website very briefly, and have you put it on social media already, Anthony? I'm not sure how far you've got with it. We were discussing it yesterday. We will see what happens. I'm tempted to write and ask them where they got it from or why they said it, but I haven't had a chance yet. It just came up over the weekend.
Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I picked this issue up over the weekend on my angling news feed, and obviously alerted Stephen as to the content of the news post, the poster that was being used on social media. I mean, generally, I support the work of Save Our Sea Bass. They advocate sustainable conservation of this important species, but on this occasion, obviously, I was very concerned as to the content of the post they put up. Checked with Stephen. Stephen confirmed that it was absolutely not the case. Obviously, a rebuttal has been put on the authority website, but Stephen also indicated that the authority itself received a large number of emails following this post going up. And I think my concern is that we as an authority need to actually, we need to go stronger than what Stephen suggests. Stephen suggests writing to them. I think we should certainly write to them, and I think we should actually invite them at their earliest convenience to issue a public withdrawal, as it were, and to actually acknowledge the fact that the content of this post is incorrect, and we in no way have been involved in secret lobbying or discussions. And I think it's really important because it impacts on our reputation adversely.
Sorry, Brian.
Sorry.
I've just literally received an email from Save Our Sea Bass.
All right.
Do you want me to read it?
It'd be useful.
Right.
Dear Sir or Madam, we know NWIFCA's statement today, which is we have become aware. Have you seen the statement?
No, not yet.
No.
They've put, as a result of this information, we have immediately amended our website to remove the reference to NWIFCA. We apologise for any inconvenience caused. Yours faithfully, Save Our Sea Bass team.
Right.
Anthony, sorry to interrupt, Brian. I was going to say, either we've got the wrong end of the stick or they've immediately responded, because I clicked the link instantly, it arrived, and I could find no mention of Northwest NWIFCA. Right. So that concurs with what I'm looking at right now.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Is that sufficient then to resolve our concerns?
It's an issue that relates to social media. So in the minds of the people who saw that post, we're still responsible.
Yeah.
We're still responsible. So I actually think that it's nice of them to apologise for us, but are they intent on subsequently issuing a correction by way of social media that actually ensures that the general public and the angling public is aware that we haven't been involved in this? And I think it really is important because it's our reputation as a public authority.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Jim?
I would 100% agree. It's one thing to send us an email saying terribly sorry, we've changed our website, but mud sticks. as it were. And I think this is sort of fake news territory, isn't it? As a result of secret lobbying. Well, yeah, come on. What have you seen that says there's been secret lobbying? Obviously, they're making it up. If we were once there and are now no longer there, and we know we haven't done any secret lobbying, then this isn't credible. So I would have thought that responding and pressing for a public apology and correction to go out in all the media outlets that they've used would be an appropriate course of action.
Thanks, Jim. I'd note the proposal from Brian. Joe?
Yeah, just to agree with Brian and Jim there, I think it'd be appropriate for them to sort of, you know, put a statement out on all the forums that they put out the original incorrect statement. But just on this, I mean, I initially thought there could have been some confusion with somebody reading some papers surrounding the netting bylaw. I'm really not sure. And I think that they would have had to have stretched some thin ideas from that to come up with this. But it could have it could have come from that in some respects. I'm not sure.
Great, thank you. So do we have a formal proposal from Brian then for officers to request further to their email for them to issue a correction on the website, social media and any other media outlets, removing our involvement in any secret lobbying?
Absolutely.
Is that a formal proposal, Brian?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Seconded by Jim. Kelsey, was yours a comment or were you trying to second? No. Seconded by Jim then. All of those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? That was unanimous there, Anthony.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I haven't received any other items for any other business, Brian?
I have got one, Chair, very, very quickly. I understand that the authority has agreed to some engagement work with the Angling Trust in November. Can the Chief Exec just perhaps outline what form that's going to take?
No, I can't actually. I don't know anything about it, Brian. Are you sure we have?
Yeah, I've received. I'll forward the newsletter on to you, the press release, because the Angling Trust has indicated that agreement's been reached to engage with all the IFCAs, and there's a date in November when we've agreed to do that. Apparently.
Okay.
I'll forward it on to you, Stephen.
Yeah. Okay. Do that. Yes. Yes. Okay. And I'll find out about it. I don't know why I've missed it. Nobody else knows anything about this. John, Joe. No.
Great. Okay.
I mean, it may be something that the Association of IFCA has agreed to do. The
dates are set on the calendar, Stephen, so I find it rather strange.
Yeah, me too. I find it very strange as well. I'll follow it. If you could send me through what you've got, I'll find out what I can. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other final comments? No, if not, I'll just quickly run through what I've noted down as the resolutions from today. I just thought it might be helpful, given that it's going to be quite some time before we get the minutes through. So there was a resolution for the August minutes to be taken forward to the May meeting for formal approval. There was a resolution for Joe's paper on the netting bylaw to come to the May TSB, and a separate resolution for members to work to assist Stephen to produce a strategy document around the bylaw review for the next TSB. There was an action for Jim to raise his concerns over the impact of science team turnover with the finance subcommittee. And a resolution for officers to put together a plan or methodology for the need to amend the cockle closed period if necessary. resolution to ask for a correction to the website and social media around the Save Our Sea Bass false statement, and then just an action for Brian to forward his email newsletter from the Angling Trust to Stephen to find out more about the workshop in November. Have I missed anything there that anyone's aware of? No. Jim?
I was just going to ask, actually, we probably should have done this when we were talking about it, but with regard to the strategy for bylaw review, do we want to get a date in the diary between now and the next meeting for a discussion between those members that are interested, like from our December meeting, for instance, about bylaws, and Stephen? We could do that maybe with a doodle poll or something in the next month or so.
Yeah, we didn't in the resolution decide whether that would be a meeting or via correspondence over email. I'm not
either way.
sure who would be on that group, because I think there was some debate last time that we'll end up having the whole of TSB or the whole of TSB, I guess, would be.
Well, we could do it by correspondence then, if it's easier.
Maybe easier by correspondence. I don't know. Okay. And do you have a preference?
Stephen?
Sorry. No, whatever members want on this.
We asked if you had a preference.
As to whether to have a meeting or to do it by correspondence.
Yeah.
I feel that a meeting is would probably be helpful. I think we've kind of kicked it around with papers and reports and so on quite a long time, and I would rather have members talk about their concept of a strategy in this respect and what they wanted to include. But it's up to you.
Okay, so we probably need to understand who would be interested in attending that meeting, so that perhaps a doodle poll can be sent around. Could members indicate if they're interested in joining that meeting?
Shall I just send it to the whole of TSB, or do you want me to pick out those who put their hands up now?
I suppose the problem is if people don't respond to the doodle poll, are you waiting for them to respond, or do you know that they don't want to be involved?
Gary wasn't on the room. I think he'll want to be a member. I think he'll want to be consulted on that.
Who's left? Sorry.
Gary, I noticed he just disappeared. Yeah, he'll definitely want to be consulted on netting and bylaw.
It's still there. It's still there, Steve.
So to be clear, Steve, this is about the strategy, not specifically the netting bylaw.
It's about the strategy.
Yeah.
Of all the bylaws.
Yeah. Okay.
And I will bring to that, or make available, the report, not the one this time, the previous bylaw review report that I've used. I'm not planning to write anything else at this stage.
It might be useful to bring those documents that came out of the previous bylaw review meetings.
I would have thought so, yeah.
Okay.
Great. So I presume officers are happy to organise that.
Great.
Great. Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.